Are you ready to improve your English listening and speaking skills? Have you ever struggled to understand native speakers in real-life situations? Or maybe you want to express yourself more clearly and confidently in conversations. In today's episode, we're going to help you do just that. Welcome to the Super English Podcast. If you're new here, we upload daily episodes to help you improve your English naturally. In this episode, you'll hear real-life stories with useful vocabulary and expressions. Listening to these stories will help you understand English in everyday situations, and by repeating the phrases, you'll improve your speaking skills too. Let's start with this simple question. Have you ever had a moment when you misunderstood someone in English? Imagine ordering food at a restaurant, but the waiter doesn't understand what you're saying, or talking to a coworker, but missing an important detail in the conversation. Frustrating, right?
Let me tell you a personal story. A few years ago, my friend Alex traveled to New York for the first time. He was excited but nervous about speaking English. On his first day, he walked into a small cafe to order breakfast. He wanted a croissant and a coffee, so he confidently said, "Can I have a croissant and a coffee, please?" But the cashier looked confused and asked, "Sorry, what was that?" Alex repeated himself, but the cashier still didn't understand. He started feeling nervous. Then another customer stepped in and said, "He means a croissant." Suddenly, the cashier understood. This moment taught Alex an important lesson. Sometimes pronunciation makes a big difference in understanding. He realized that even though he knew the words, hearing them in real situations was different from learning them in a textbook. That's why listening is so important. The more you listen to real English, the more natural it becomes. And when you hear common phrases often, you'll feel more confident using them yourself. Now, let's talk about another real-life situation. My cousin Sophie moved to Canada for work. She spoke English well, but when she arrived, she had trouble following conversations. People spoke quickly, used slang, and sometimes even interrupted each other. One day, she had an important meeting, and her manager asked, "Can you touch base with Mike about the new project?" Sophie was confused. Touch base? Should I physically touch something? She wondered. Later, she found out that touch base means to check in or discuss something briefly. That small phrase made a big difference in her understanding. After that, she started paying attention to idioms and expressions in conversations. Here's a tip for you. When you hear a new phrase, don't just memorize the meaning. Listen to how it's used in real conversations. Try repeating it aloud and using it in your own sentences. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. Now, think about your own experience. Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't understand something in English? Maybe you misheard a word, or maybe you weren't familiar with an expression. What did you do? How did you handle it? Imagine you're at a hotel, and the receptionist says, "Would you like a wake-up call?" If you're not familiar with this phrase, you might think they mean, "Do you need to wake up in life?" But actually, a wake-up call means the hotel will call your room in the morning to wake you up. These small but important moments happen all the time in real life. That's why listening to real conversations is one of the best ways to improve your English. Let's do a quick practice exercise. I'll say a short sentence, and I want you to repeat it after me. Ready?
I'd like to order a coffee, please. Now you try. Great. Let's try another one. Could you repeat that, please? Perfect. These are simple, polite phrases you can use in everyday situations. The more you listen and repeat, the more confident you'll feel. Now, let's continue with another real-life story. A few years ago, my friend Ethan moved to London for a new job. He was excited. It was his dream to work in an international company. He had studied English for years, but mostly from books and grammar exercises. He thought he was prepared, but when he arrived in London, he faced an unexpected challenge. Real-life conversations were much harder to understand than he expected. On his first day at work, his manager, Rachel, introduced him to the team. Everyone was friendly, but they spoke quickly and used a lot of expressions he had never seen in textbooks. At lunchtime, one of his coworkers, Tom, said, "Hey, Ethan, let's grab a bite." Ethan was confused. Grab what? What does that mean? He thought. He hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, okay. He followed Tom to a nearby cafe, still unsure what was happening. When they arrived, he finally understood. Grab a bite just means go and get something to eat. It was such a simple phrase, but because he had never heard it before in a real conversation, it completely confused him. That day, Ethan realized that even though he knew a lot of English, he needed more practice listening to how people actually speak. So, he decided to make a plan. Every day, he started listening to English podcasts while walking to work. At lunchtime, instead of sitting alone, he made an effort to join conversations with his coworkers. At first, it was difficult. He didn't always understand everything, and sometimes he felt nervous. But instead of staying quiet, he started asking questions like, "Sorry, what does that mean?" Or, "Can you say that again?" His coworkers were happy to explain, and little by little, he got better at understanding them. One day, he was in a meeting and his manager said, "All right, let's wrap things up." This time, instead of feeling lost, he knew exactly what it meant. Let's finish the meeting. He smiled to himself because just a few weeks earlier, he wouldn't have understood that phrase. This is an important lesson for anyone learning English. Sometimes the words themselves are not difficult, but the way people say them in real conversations can be very different from what you see in textbooks. That's why listening practice is so important. The more you listen to natural English, the more comfortable you will feel when speaking. Now, let's talk about another real-life situation. Imagine you're traveling to an English-speaking country for the first time. You arrive at the airport and you need to go through immigration. The officer asks, "What's the purpose of your visit?" If you're not familiar with this phrase, you might feel nervous. Purpose? Are they asking about my job? My reason for traveling? What should I say? But if you've practiced listening to common travel conversations, you'll know that the correct answer is something simple, like, "I'm here for tourism," or "I'm visiting family." A few months ago, my cousin Hannah traveled to Australia. She was confident in her English, but when she arrived at the airport, she got nervous. The immigration officer asked, "Do you have anything to declare?" She froze for a moment. The word declare sounded serious, almost legal. She thought, did I bring something illegal? Am I in trouble? She took a deep breath and asked, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The officer calmly explained, are you carrying any food, alcohol, or large amounts of money? Now she understood. Declare just means to report something. She smiled and said, no, I don't have anything to declare. The officer nodded and let her pass. Later, she laughed about the situation. She realized the problem wasn't her English. It was just that she had never heard that phrase in real life before. This is why listening to natural conversations is so helpful. The more you hear these phrases in context, the easier it will be to understand and respond naturally. Let's do a quick practice exercise. Repeat after me. Where are you traveling from? Great! Here's another one. Do you have a return ticket? Perfect. The more you practice listening and speaking, the more confident you'll feel in real situations. Now let's talk about another important moment when listening skills make a big difference. Ordering food at a restaurant. Imagine you're in a busy cafe in London. You walk up to the counter and the barista says, "What can I get you?" If you're prepared, you can simply say, "I'd like a cappuccino, please." But what if they ask, "For here or to go?" If you're not familiar with this phrase, you might feel confused. A friend of mine, Liam, had this exact experience when he traveled to the US. He walked into a coffee shop and ordered a latte. The cashier asked, "For here or to go?" He hesitated. He had never heard this phrase before. He guessed that to go might mean takeaway, so he said, "To go." Luckily, he was right, but at that moment, he felt nervous because he wasn't 100% sure. After that, he started listening carefully to how people ordered food and drinks. He noticed that in the US, people often say, "Can I get a?" instead of "I would like." He also learned that "that'll be" is a common way for cashiers to tell you the total price. For example, the cashier might say, "That'll be $5.50." If you don't know this phrase, you might not realize they are telling you the price. But once you hear it a few times, it becomes natural. This is why real-life listening is so important. The more you hear these phrases, the more confident you will feel when speaking. Now let's practice. I'll say some common phrases you might hear in a cafe. Repeat after me. Phrase 1. What can I get for you? Now you say it. Great. Phrase 2. That'll be $5.50. Try saying it aloud. When you listen and repeat, your brain gets used to the sounds of English and speaking becomes easier. Now let's continue with another real-life example. We'll move to another important area where listening and speaking skills make a big difference: making small talk. Small talk is the kind of casual conversation you have with people in everyday situations, like when you meet someone new or when you're waiting for a bus. It can feel difficult at first, but once you practice it, it becomes one of the most valuable ways to improve your fluency in English. A few months ago, my friend Sophia, who is from Argentina, moved to an English-speaking city for work.
She had studied English for many years, but she was nervous about speaking with strangers, especially when it came to making small talk. She thought that small talk wasn't as important as knowing grammar and vocabulary, but she quickly realized it was a huge part of everyday life. He noticed that in the US, people often say, "Can I get a?" instead of "I would like." He also learned that "that'll be" is a common way for cashiers to tell you the total price. For example, the cashier might say, "That'll be $5.50." If you don't know this phrase, you might not realize they are telling you the price. But once you hear it a few times, it becomes natural. This is why real-life listening is so important. The more you hear these phrases, the more confident you will feel when speaking. Now, let's practice. I'll say some common phrases you might hear in a cafe. Repeat after me. Phrase 1. What can I get for you? Now, you say it. Great. Phrase 2. That'll be $5.50. Try saying it aloud. When you listen and repeat, your brain gets used to the sounds of English, and speaking becomes easier.
Now, let's continue with another real-life example. We'll move to another important area where listening and speaking skills make a big difference: making small talk. Small talk is the kind of casual conversation you have with people in everyday situations, like when you meet someone new or when you're waiting for a bus. It can feel difficult at first, but once you practice it, it becomes one of the most valuable ways to improve your fluency in English. A few months ago, my friend Sophia, who is from Argentina, moved to an English-speaking city for work. She had studied English for many years, but she was nervous about speaking with strangers, especially when it came to making small talk. She thought that small talk wasn't as important as knowing grammar and vocabulary. But she quickly realized it was a huge part of everyday life. Her first week at work was a bit stressful. At lunch, her colleague Daniel invited her to join him and a few others in the break room. Sophia was unsure what to say. She didn't know these people very well, and she was afraid she might say the wrong thing. When they sat down to eat, Daniel asked, "So, how was your weekend?" Sophia froze for a second. In Argentina, people often talk about what they did over the weekend, but she didn't know if she should share something personal or keep it simple. She finally decided to say, "It was good. I went to the park with my family." That was a safe answer, right? But then Daniel smiled and said, "That sounds nice. What did you do at the park?" Sophia realized this was just like asking someone about their hobbies or interests. It wasn't a deep conversation. It was simply a way to connect. Over the next few days, she became more comfortable with small talk. She started asking her coworkers questions like, "Do you like the weather here? What do you like to do in your free time?" And she was surprised at how easy it became. Through these simple conversations, Sophia learned something very important. Small talk isn't just about talking, it's about connecting with people. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And when you listen carefully, you pick up useful phrases and expressions that help you speak more naturally. For example, when Daniel asked about Sophia's weekend, he didn't say, "What did you do over the weekend?" Instead, he said, "How was your weekend?" This is a very common way to ask about someone's time off. When you hear expressions like this in real conversations, they stick with you, and soon you'll be able to use them yourself. Here's another tip. In small talk, people often don't expect long answers. It's more about giving a short response and then asking the other person about their experience. For instance, someone might say, "The weekend was great, but I wish it was longer." This shows they're giving a little information, but also leaving space for you to share. Sophia started using this technique, and it helped her speak more confidently. Instead of worrying about saying something perfect, she focused on the flow of the conversation and learning new phrases. One phrase she picked up during her first few weeks was, "What about you?" When someone asked how her weekend was, she learned it's perfectly natural to respond with, "It was good, thanks. What about you?" These small, everyday conversations will help you improve your listening and speaking skills, and you'll start to feel more confident in social situations. This is something you can't learn from a textbook alone. It's about engaging with people, paying attention to how they speak, and practicing your responses. Now, let's shift gears and talk about something else that can challenge English learners: understanding different accents. When you're learning English, you might find it hard to understand different accents or regional variations, whether it's British, American, Australian, or even different accents within the same country. Understanding accents is an important part of mastering English. Let's take a step back for a moment. Think about your own journey in learning English. Have you had moments where you felt unsure or confused in a conversation? Maybe you were listening to someone speaking quickly, or you didn't understand a slang word or idiom. It happens to all of us. It's part of the process. The key is not to give up. Keep practicing and engaging with real conversations. Every time you listen, you get a little bit better. Remember, English isn't just something you learn from books. It's something you experience through conversations, stories, and real-life situations. Whether it's making small talk with a friend, ordering food at a restaurant, or listening to someone tell a story, every moment is a chance to improve. By listening to real stories, you start to notice the natural rhythm of English, how words flow together, how people express themselves, and how to choose the right phrases for the right moment. This is the kind of practice that will help you sound more natural when you speak. When I was visiting New York a couple of years ago, I got a little lost while walking around the city, so I decided to stop and ask someone for directions. I approached a friendly-looking person and said, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to the subway?" He looked at me and replied, "Yeah, just go straight ahead, take a left at the lights, and you'll see it on your right." That was simple enough, but I was surprised at how fast he spoke. He didn't slow down to explain, so I had to listen very carefully to catch all the details. In that moment,
I realized how important it is to focus not just on the words, but on how they're delivered. Native speakers often speak quickly, and they use slang or expressions that might not appear in your textbooks. For instance, when the man said, "Take a left at the lights," he was using a common phrase meaning turn left at the traffic lights. It was casual and quick, but once I understood the phrase, I realized how useful it would be for future conversations. Tip: to improve your skills in asking for directions, start by learning common phrases and expressions. You'll often hear people say things like, "Go straight," "Turn left," "It's around the corner," "It's just a few blocks away." These are all useful and appear frequently in everyday conversations. When practicing, listen to how native speakers use these phrases, maybe in podcasts, YouTube videos, or movies, and notice the context. After practicing, try to imagine yourself in the situation. Picture being lost in a new city and needing to ask for help. Practicing these types of conversations in your mind, or even aloud, will help you prepare for real life.
Let's move on to another practical area that will help you with your listening and speaking: handling problems and complaints in English. This is an important part of everyday life, whether it's at a store, in a hotel, or during an interaction with customer service. Knowing how to express your problems clearly is essential. A few months ago, while staying in a hotel during a business trip, I checked into my room and discovered the Wi-Fi wasn't working. I called the front desk and said, "Excuse me, the Wi-Fi isn't working in my room. Could you help me?" The receptionist replied politely, "I'm sorry to hear that. Let me check and see what I can do." A few minutes later, she called back and explained that the Wi-Fi was down in the building but would be fixed soon. She was polite and apologetic, which made me feel better. From this situation, I learned two things: remain calm and explain clearly. Use phrases like, "I'm having trouble with," "There's a problem with." Listen carefully to the response. Service staff might say things like, "Let me check on that for you. I'll have someone take care of it." By listening to real-life situations like this, you'll be better prepared to handle problems in English. And remember, if you don't understand something, ask for clarification. "Could you explain that again? I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat it?"
Imagine walking into a bustling cafe on a cool London morning. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee fills the air. As you approach the counter, the barista greets you with a cheerful, "What can I get you today?" For a moment, you pause. This casual phrasing might be different from the formal language you learned in textbooks. You reply confidently, "I'd like a latte, please." Then the barista adds, "That'll be $3.50. Would you like any pastry with that?" In that instant, you realize that real-life English is fast, friendly, and often informal. Have you ever been surprised by a casual tone in a familiar situation? How did you respond when someone used expressions you hadn't practiced in class? I remember visiting a small cafe in Brookfield, expecting a polite, formal exchange, but instead, the friendly, informal language caught me off guard in the best way.
It taught me that adapting to different styles is key to understanding everyday conversation. To practice, imagine yourself in that cafe. Visualize hearing, "What can I get you?" and confidently responding with your order. Repeat these phrases aloud until they feel natural and part of your active vocabulary. Now, picture yourself in New York City, surrounded by traffic noise and the chatter of pedestrians. A few years back, I found myself wandering the vibrant streets of Manhattan, trying to reach a well-known museum. I approached a local and asked, "Excuse me, could you please tell me how to get to the Metropolitan Museum of Art?" The local replied, "Sure, just go straight for 2 blocks, then turn left at the big intersection, and you'll see the museum on your right." Notice how the instructions are clear, but given quickly. Have you ever been in a situation where someone spoke too fast or used unfamiliar phrases when giving directions? If so, how did you handle it? If you're not sure, practice by repeating directions aloud. Straight for 2 blocks, left at the intersection, museum on the right. Repetition builds your confidence in both understanding and using everyday phrases. Small talk is a fundamental part of building relationships, both personal and professional. I recall an afternoon at a community event in London where I met a gentleman named Ethan. He began with, "Lovely weather today, isn't it?" I replied, "Yes, it's a beautiful day. I love how the sunshine brightens everything." That simple exchange opened a pleasant discussion about outdoor activities, local parks, and weekend plans. Think about your own experiences. What topics do you naturally bring up when meeting someone new? Practice by asking questions like, "How are you today? What have you been up to lately?" The more you practice, the easier it becomes to keep a conversation flowing.
Now, let's take small talk into the workplace. Imagine you're in a virtual meeting with colleagues from around the world. Your manager says, "Let's circle back to that point later." At first, you might wonder what "circle back" means, but in this context, it simply means return to a topic later. When you hear unfamiliar phrases in meetings, jot them down and ask for clarification if needed. Practice repeating business phrases until they become second nature. Phone conversations. Phone calls can be challenging because you rely only on audio cues. Once, I called customer service to fix my internet connection. The representative, Tom, said, "Can you please describe the problem you're experiencing?" I explained, "My connection keeps dropping and it's very frustrating." He replied, "I understand. Let me run a diagnostic test on your line." His calm, clear tone helped me feel at ease. In similar situations, it's useful to know phrases like, "Could you repeat that?" Or, "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that." Travel scenarios. Imagine arriving at an airport in an English-speaking country. Over the intercom, you hear, "Due to inclement weather, your flight will be delayed by 30 minutes. If you're not familiar with this phrasing, you might feel anxious. Later, you ask a staff member, "Could you tell me what the delay is about?" They reply, "It's because of bad weather conditions." Practice key phrases like "flight delayed" and "inclement weather" until you're comfortable using them. Discussing hobbies and interests. Picture a quiet evening at a local event. Someone asks, "What do you enjoy doing in your free time?" You might answer, I love reading, hiking, and trying out new recipes. These conversations are great for practicing descriptive adjectives and expanding your vocabulary.
Interactive practice. Repeat after me. How are you today? What have you been up to lately? The weather is really nice, isn't it? I'd love to hear more about that. Say them slowly, then naturally, until they roll off your tongue effortlessly. Workplace meetings. In a meeting, your team leader might say, "We need to finalize the project timeline by Friday." A colleague might add, "Can everyone confirm their availability for Thursday?" You could reply, "I'm available on Thursday, and I'll send a calendar invite shortly." Notice how clear, concise language helps coordinate plans. Interacting with service providers. Imagine booking a hotel room and discovering the Wi-Fi doesn't work. You call the front desk. "Excuse me, the Wi-Fi in my room isn't working. Could you please help me?" The receptionist responds, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Let me check on that for you." Understanding slang. Now picture yourself at a local market in Australia. A vendor calls out, "This is a ripper deal." At first, you might wonder what ripper means. Later, you learn it's Australian slang for excellent or fantastic. This is a prime example of how listening to real-life conversations teaches you regional vocabulary and idioms you might not find in a textbook. Reflect on any slang or idiomatic expressions you've heard recently. Write them down and try using them in your own sentences. Over time, these expressions will become a natural part of your speech. Another engaging scenario involves social gatherings with family and friends. Imagine sitting around a dinner table where everyone is sharing stories about their day. One relative asks, "What was the best part of your day?" You respond, "I had a wonderful conversation with a new friend at the cafe." This warm, informal exchange is common in family settings. Think about the simple yet powerful words you use during these conversations. Words like wonderful, enjoyable, and delightful. Practicing these expressions in a relaxed setting builds your confidence and reinforces your natural speaking style. Now, let's talk about the role of digital communication in modern English practice. Email, instant messaging, and video calls have become part of our daily lives. For example, when writing an email for work, you might start with, "Dear Mr. Carter, I hope this email finds you well," and close with, "Sincerely, Anna." On the other hand, when texting a friend, you might simply write, "Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight?" Notice how the language shifts depending on the medium. Consider your own experiences with digital communication. Which style do you find most challenging? Practice both formal and informal writing to build a balanced skill set. Let's move on to a scenario involving cultural events.
Imagine attending a local art exhibition where a curator explains a painting by saying, "This artwork reflects the artist's inner turmoil during a time of great change." You ask, "What inspired this style?" The curator replies, "The use of bold colors and dynamic brushstrokes represents the conflict between tradition and modernity." This conversation not only introduces you to artistic vocabulary, but also encourages you to express abstract ideas. Think about how you would describe a piece of art or a cultural event. Practicing such descriptive language can enrich your vocabulary and make your conversations more engaging. Another practical scenario is participating in academic discussions. Picture yourself in a university lecture where the professor states, "Today, we will explore the impact of global warming on urban development." After the lecture, you ask, "Could you please elaborate on the strategies cities are using to combat climate change?" This type of dialogue requires both active listening and thoughtful questioning. Consider how you might summarize what you've learned in your own words. This practice reinforces your understanding and prepares you for future academic conversations. In addition to structured scenarios, spontaneous conversations are an important part of real-life communication. Imagine you're at a community park and overhear a group discussing the latest local news. One person remarks, "The new park renovations have really transformed this area." You might join in by saying, "I agree. The improvements are fantastic. Have you noticed the new playground features?" These unscripted interactions offer a chance to practice impromptu speaking and active listening. Ask yourself, when was the last time you joined a spontaneous conversation? What strategies can you use to smoothly enter such discussions? Now, let's explore a scenario many of us face online: participating in discussion forums and chat rooms. In these digital spaces, language is often informal, filled with abbreviations and emoticons. You might see a post like, "Has anyone tried the new cafe downtown? It's lit!" Even if the language is casual, it still provides insights into current slang and conversational style. Spend some time browsing online groups or forums in English. Observe the way people interact and try to incorporate some of these expressions into your own spoken or written communication. Consider also the challenge of handling disagreements or misunderstandings in conversation. Even with clear language, miscommunications can occur. I recall a conversation with a friend where our opinions on a current event differed. Instead of letting the discussion become tense, we said, "I see your point, but I have a different perspective. Can we clarify our thoughts further?" Using phrases like these helps keep the conversation respectful and constructive. Reflect on any disagreements you've experienced. What language could have helped smooth the situation? Practice using such phrases in role-playing exercises with a friend or record yourself until they feel natural. Let's now shift to another rich source of language practice: Storytelling. Telling your own story not only improves your speaking skills, but also makes your conversation more engaging. Imagine recounting a memorable day when everything went unexpectedly. Start with, "One day, I found myself lost in a busy city, and that experience taught me the value of patience and resourcefulness." As you narrate, include vivid details. Describe the sounds, the sights, and even your emotions. Storytelling helps you organize your thoughts and express yourself in a structured manner. Think about a recent experience and try to narrate it in English. This exercise will boost both your vocabulary and your confidence in speaking. Interactive exercises are an essential part of this journey. I invite you now to repeat the following sentences with me, paying close attention to the natural rhythm and emphasis. I appreciate your help. Could you please repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. That sounds interesting. I would love to join you. Repeat each sentence several times until it feels comfortable and natural. These exercises are designed to build your muscle memory for common conversational phrases. Now, imagine yourself at a live music concert. The announcer's voice, full of energy, fills the venue as they say, "Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for an unforgettable performance by tonight's headliner." Such vibrant expressions and high-energy announcements require you to match the speaker's enthusiasm. Visualize yourself in that setting. What would you say if you wanted to complement the performance? Perhaps, "The energy on stage is electrifying." Practicing such dynamic language can help you adjust your tone and pace to suit different emotional contexts. Next, picture yourself in a quiet bookstore. You approach a clerk and ask, "Could you recommend a good mystery novel?" The clerk smiles and replies, "Certainly. This bestseller has a captivating plot and intriguing characters." This simple interaction introduces descriptive adjectives and polite inquiries that are common in everyday conversations. How would you describe your favorite book or genre? Spend a few moments thinking about this and practice forming sentences that describe your interest in detail. Let's turn our attention now to public services. Imagine you're at a government office applying for a new passport. The clerk greets you with, "Good morning. How may I assist you today?" You reply, "I need to renew my passport, please." The conversation continues with precise questions and answers, such as, "Could you please provide your current passport number? Do you have all the required documents?" These formal exchanges require you to be both clear and concise. Practice such dialogues with a friend or even role-play them in front of a mirror. Notice how using polite expressions like please and thank you makes the conversation smoother and more effective. Let's go ahead and look at how you can start by practicing small, everyday phrases that will help you build your confidence. These are things you can use in almost any situation, whether you're at the store, meeting a new person, or just talking with friends. For example, when you're introducing yourself to someone, you can say, "Hi, my name is," your name. "Nice to meet you." This simple sentence might seem easy, but it's a great way to start practicing your pronunciation, tone, and timing. Another great sentence to know is, "How are you today?" It's a friendly, welcoming way to start a conversation. When people ask you how you're doing, just respond with something simple like, "I'm doing well, thank you," or "I'm good, how about you?" This is an easy way to keep the conversation going and show that you're ready to talk. Now, let's talk about how to express your thoughts clearly. You don't have to use long or complicated sentences to be understood. In fact, sometimes simple sentences are the most effective. For example, if someone asks you, "What did you do today?" you could say, "I went to the park," or "I worked on a project." Keeping things clear and to the point helps your listener understand you better, and it also makes you feel more comfortable as you speak. One of the challenges when learning a language is knowing how to react in different situations. Sometimes it can be tricky to know what to say next in a conversation, especially if the topic changes quickly. The key here is to listen closely to what the other person is saying. If they ask you a question, try to respond in a way that shows you're interested. You can say things like, "That sounds interesting," or "I never thought of it that way." These simple phrases show that you're actively listening and they help you build a stronger connection with the other person. If you're not sure how to respond, don't worry. It's okay to take a moment to think before you speak. A good way to give yourself some time is by saying, "Let me think about that for a second." This buys you a little time to gather your thoughts and gives you the confidence to respond more thoughtfully. When it comes to speaking English in more formal settings, like a job interview or a meeting, you might want to use slightly different phrases. But the idea is the same. Be clear, concise, and confident. For example, instead of saying, "I like this idea," you could say, "I believe this is a good approach." It makes your statement sound a little more formal, but it still communicates the same thing. Remember, the key to speaking confidently is to practice regularly. You don't have to wait for a special occasion to practice your English. You can practice every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. For example, you could practice your English while doing everyday tasks like shopping or cooking. If you're at the grocery store, try reading the labels on the products in English, or practice saying the names of things you're buying. You can also practice English with your friends or family by talking about your day or asking them about their plans. One of the best ways to practice speaking English is by using apps or language exchange programs. These can help you practice with other learners or even native speakers. If you're not sure where to start, look for online communities where people help each other practice speaking English. There are lots of them. Another great tip is to listen to English podcasts, watch TV shows, or read books in English. When you listen to English being spoken, you'll start to hear common phrases and expressions you can use in your own conversations. Try to repeat the phrases you hear and practice saying them aloud. This will help you get used to the rhythm and flow of the language. And don't forget, celebrate your progress. Every time you have a conversation in English, it's a step forward. Even if you make mistakes, that's okay. The most important thing is that you're learning and improving. The more you practice, the easier it will get. And soon enough, you'll be speaking English more naturally and confidently than ever before. Another important part of building confidence in speaking English is finding topics you're passionate about. If you're excited about a subject, it's much easier to speak about it. For example, if you love sports, you can practice talking about your favorite teams or players in English. If you enjoy cooking, you can practice describing recipes or talking about your favorite dishes. When you talk about things you enjoy, you'll feel more confident and motivated to keep learning. But what if you don't feel like you have much to talk about? That's okay too. You don't always have to have a big story or an interesting topic to share. Sometimes it's just about having a casual conversation. You can start with simple questions like, "What did you do today?" or "Do you like this movie?" Small talk is a great way to practice speaking English and to build your confidence over time. Lastly, always keep in mind that building confidence in speaking English is a journey, not a race. It takes time and practice, and there will be ups and downs along the way. But as long as you keep pushing forward, you'll keep improving. So, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to speak up. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice, and each one will bring you closer to your goal of speaking English confidently and fluently. Let me share a personal example with you. One time, I was traveling in a foreign country and trying to order food at a local restaurant. The waiter didn't speak English very well, and I didn't speak the local language, so yes, it was a bit tricky. But we managed to communicate using gestures, pointing to items on the menu, and asking simple questions like, "Is this spicy?" or "Can I have it without sauce?" Even though we didn't speak the same language fluently, the experience taught me something important. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to make yourself understood. And sometimes that means finding creative ways to communicate. When you're speaking English, it's the same. It's not about saying every sentence perfectly, it's about adapting to the situation and making the conversation work. In real-life conversations, you won't have time to think about every single word. Instead, you need to practice speaking naturally, even when you make mistakes. That's how you build confidence. Think about all the little things you say every day. For example, when you're talking about a recent event, you might say, "I went to a concert last weekend. It was amazing. Have you ever been to one?" This simple sentence helps you practice the past tense while telling a story that other people can connect with. The beauty of using real-life experiences is that they teach you how to keep a conversation going. It's not just about speaking in complete sentences, it's about making the interaction flow. Imagine two friends talking about their day. Friend 1 says, "I had such a busy day today." Friend 2 asks, "Oh, really? What did you do?" This is an excellent way to practice asking questions and keeping the dialogue alive. You're not just focusing on the words, you're also practicing the rhythm of the conversation. One person's response naturally leads to the other person's next question or comment. It's a skill that takes time, but it's worth every bit of effort. When you listen to conversations like this, pay attention to the little details. How do people stress certain words? Where do they pause? How do they show emotions in their voice? For example, if someone says, "I can't believe it," their tone might express surprise or disbelief. Understanding that tone and emotion helps you truly understand what they're trying to say. Here's another example. A friend once told me about moving to a new city. She said, "It was overwhelming at first. Everything was new. New people, new places, new routine." She repeated the word new to emphasize how unfamiliar everything felt.
This kind of repetition is very common in everyday speech, and noticing it can help you express yourself in similar ways. You don't have to look far for examples, just listen to the conversations around you. It could be at a coffee shop, on the bus, or even in a TV show or movie. Each one is an opportunity to improve your listening skills. If you're watching a TV show, notice how people react in different situations. How do they express surprise, frustration, or happiness? These emotional expressions are just as important as vocabulary. They help you understand context. When I was learning English, I watched a lot of sitcoms to get used to casual, everyday speech. For example, in the show Friends, characters often say things like, "Could you be any more dramatic?" Or, "It's not that big of a deal." They sound casual, even funny, but phrases like these are very common in real conversations. By watching them in context, I picked up on the tone and rhythm of informal speech. One big challenge for English learners is the speed of native speakers. They speak faster than you might expect, and it can be hard to catch every word. But here's the good news. The more you practice listening to natural conversations, the easier it gets. It's okay if you don't catch everything at first. That's completely normal. And speaking practice is just as important. One of the best techniques is to mimic real-life conversations. After you've listened to a podcast or watched a video, repeat some of the sentences you heard. Focus on the pronunciation, the rhythm, and the tone. You can even practice in front of a mirror or record yourself and listen back. It's like learning a musical instrument. The more you practice, the better you get. Another important skill is learning different levels of formality. For example, at work, you might say, "Could you please send me the report by the end of the day?" But with a friend, you'd probably say, "Hey, can you send me that report by today?" Same request, different tone, depending on the situation. In a professional setting, you might need to write, "I just wanted to clarify what you meant in the meeting earlier. Could you please explain it again?" This is polite and formal. But chatting with a coworker in the break room, you could say, "Hey, I didn't get what you meant earlier. Can you explain it to me?" Finally, remember this. The most powerful way to improve your English is simply to practice. You don't have to be perfect. What matters is that you're speaking, listening, and learning from each interaction. The more you practice in real-life situations, the more natural and confident you'll become.